Hello everyone, welcome to our second online English class, and this is Silas here. He's falling asleep right now, but you can kind of see him. Okay, last time I gave you some homework, so let's review that. And if you haven't done it yet, then stop the video right now and do the homework first, and then you can play this video. Okay, so the homework was to make questions for exercise 2 on page 68 in your workbook. Page 68 in your workbook. Okay, so for number 1, you can ask, what does Parvana do when she has a lot of homework? Or you can put the when clause in the front. You can say, when Parvana has a lot of homework, what does she do? Number 2, when Parvana wants to concentrate, what does she do? Or, what does Parvana do when she wants to concentrate? Okay, so for the rest of these, I'm just going to use the question word what first. But as I mentioned, you can start with the when clause. All right, so number 3, what does Parvana do when she starts her work? Number 4, what does Parvana do when she finishes a task? Number 5, what does Parvana do when she feels tired? Okay, so for number 6, you need to change the sentence a little bit for it to make sense. So you can say, how does her teacher feel when she doesn't hand in her homework on time? Or you might say, what happens when she doesn't hand in her homework on time? So for the rest of these, I'm just going to use she instead of Parvana. But of course, you can always use Parvana's name in the question. Number 7, what does she do when she feels hungry? Number 8, what does she do when she needs to focus? Number 9, what does she do when she has a lot of work to do? And number 10, what does she do when she has a deadline? Okay, so we are going to move on to lesson C in your student's book. So open to page 74. Page 74 in your student's book. Lesson C, adverb clauses. So if you remember from the last lesson, we also did adverb clauses, but we learned about using clauses with when. And this time we are going to learn about clauses with before and after. So if you remember, a when clause includes 2 activities or events that happen at the same time. But with before or after clauses, the 2 events or activities happen at different times, either before or after. So I'm going to play a video that explains the grammar focus for this lesson.
Unit 6, Lesson C, Adverb Clauses. Clauses with before and after. Clauses with before. Use before plus the present tense to order events in a sequence. The before clause introduces the second event.
I have breakfast before I check my email.
The first event is have breakfast. The second event is check my email. Clauses with before. When the before clause is at the beginning, use a comma. Remember to pause after the comma when you speak.
Before I check my email, I have breakfast.
Before she gets on the subway, she buys coffee. She does her homework before she watches TV.
He stretches before he goes running.
They eat dinner before they wash the dishes.
Before he goes running, he stretches.
Before they wash the dishes, they eat dinner.
Check your understanding. Look at the pictures. Complete the statement. Use before and the simple present.
She does her homework before she watches TV.
He stretches before he goes running.
They eat dinner before they wash the dishes.
Before he goes running, he stretches.
Before they wash the dishes, they eat dinner.
Clauses with after. Use after plus the present tense to order events in a sequence. The after clause introduces the first event.
I have breakfast after I check my email.
The first event is check my email. The second event is have breakfast. There are two patterns. The after clause can be at the end or at the beginning of the sentence.
I have breakfast after I check my email. After I check my email, I have breakfast.
When the after clause is at the beginning, use a comma. Remember to pause after the comma when you speak.
After I check my email, I have breakfast.
After she buys coffee, she gets on the subway.
She watches TV after she does her homework.
He goes running after he stretches.
They wash the dishes after they eat dinner.
After he stretches, he goes running.
After they eat dinner, they wash the dishes.
Check your understanding. Look at the pictures. Complete the statement. Use after and the simple present.
She watches TV after she does her homework.
He goes running after he stretches.
They wash the dishes after they eat dinner.
After he stretches, he goes running.
After they eat dinner, they wash the dishes.
Let's review. Use before and after clauses to order events in a sequence. The after clause introduces the first event. The before clause introduces the second event.
After I watch the news, I eat dinner.
Watch the news is the first event. Eat dinner is the second event.
Before she eats breakfast, she reads the newspaper.
Reads the newspaper is the first event. Eats breakfast is the second event.
She reads the newspaper before she eats breakfast.
Reads the newspaper is the first event. Eats breakfast is the second event.
I eat dinner after I watch the news.
Watch the news is the first event. Eat dinner is the second event. Use a comma when before and after clauses are at the beginning of a sentence. When you read out loud, pause after the comma.
So with before and after clauses, you can also put them in the beginning or at the end, just like when clauses, because they are all adverb clauses. So adverb clauses generally can be placed in the front or at the end of a sentence. Okay, so let's look at exercise 2, practice. Look at the two activities in the exercise and find them on Bonnie's morning schedule. Which happens first? Which happens second? Number them. Then write two sentences, one with after and one with before. So if you look at Bonnie's morning schedule, you can see 6 different activities. Okay, so let's look at the first 2 activities. I'm gonna write these down. So let's see. Take a shower and get dressed. Okay, so if you look at number 1, it says, after Bonnie takes a shower, she gets dressed. So let's determine which one is the first activity. I know this can be confusing, especially if you speak a language where the sentence structure is different than English. But another way to think about this sentence is separate it into 2 sentences. So for example, we might say, after Bonnie takes a shower, so this is the first activity, she gets dressed. But you can also say, Bonnie takes a shower. After that, she gets dressed. Then it's a little bit easier because you know that she takes a shower first and then after that, she gets dressed. So you can think about number 1 in those 2 sentences. Okay, so number 2 is another way to say the sentence. So the meaning is the same, but this time we use before. So Bonnie takes a shower before she gets dressed. This one's a little bit easier because we can see the order. So Bonnie takes a shower before she gets dressed. Okay, so I'm going to give you some time to finish numbers 3 through 10, and then I will play the audio that has the answers.
Page 74. Exercise 2A. 1.
After Bonnie takes a shower, she gets dressed.
2.
Bonnie takes a shower before she gets dressed.
3.
Before Bonnie makes coffee, she gets dressed.
4.
Bonnie makes coffee after she gets dressed.
5.
Bonnie brings in the newspaper before she eats breakfast.
6.
Bonnie eats breakfast after she brings in the newspaper.
7.
After Bonnie eats breakfast, she leaves for work.
8.
Before Bonnie leaves for work, she eats breakfast.
9.
After Bonnie makes coffee, she brings in the newspaper.
10.
Before Bonnie brings in the newspaper, she makes coffee.
Okay, so now let's take a look at page 75, exercise B. It says, talk with a partner. Ask and answer questions about Ken, a soap opera star. Use before and after. Okay, so just like we did in the first lesson, you can practice with someone in your family, or you can practice on your own, but practice out loud so that you can get in the habit of speaking English, and so that your muscles remember how to form English words. Okay, so let's take a look at the examples. The first conversation says, what does Ken do before he eats breakfast? So let me ask you a question. Eats breakfast, that's one activity, and he does another activity. But does he do the activity first, or does he eat breakfast first? So if you look at the adverb phrase, before he eats breakfast, that means he does another activity before he eats breakfast. So he eats breakfast, but before he eats breakfast, he does something. So let's find out. So letter B, before Ken eats breakfast, he works out. That means he works out first, and then he eats breakfast. So let's take a look at the second activity, second set. What does Ken do after he works out? Okay, so Ken works out. So we know Ken works out. What does he do after he works out? And we can see the meaning is the same, but Ken eats breakfast after he works out. It's just a different way to say the sentence using either before or after. So, as I mentioned, we can also make the sentence into two separate sentences if it makes it easier to understand. So, for example, we can say, Ken works out. After that, he eats breakfast. Okay, so I'm going to give you some time to go ahead and complete numbers 3 through 8. Okay, so now I want you to look at the second part of exercise B. So you'll see under the pictures, it says, write sentences about Ken's day. But I'm going to read 2 random activities, and you need to figure out which one is first and which one is second. Okay, so number 1, goes to the studio, puts on makeup. Goes to the studio and puts on makeup. So I want you to make a sentence using before. Okay, so you can say, Ken goes to the studio before he puts on makeup. Or you can say, before Ken puts on makeup, he goes to the studio. Okay, the next one, number 2, performs his scene and memorizes his lines. Performs his scene and memorizes his lines. This time I want you to use after. Okay, so you can say, Ken performs his scene after he memorizes his lines. Or you can say, after Ken memorizes his lines, he performs his scene. Okay, number 3, talks to the director and goes home and rests. Talks to the director and goes home and rests. Use before. Okay, so you can say, Ken talks to the director before he goes home and rests. Or you can say, before Ken goes home and rests, he talks to the director. Okay, so I hope you got those correct. If not, it's okay. It takes some time because, as I mentioned before, using before and after can be very confusing for many English learners. Okay, now I want you to go back to page 74 and look at Bonnie's morning schedule one more time. So I want you to practice making questions just like we did for Ken. So let's take a look at number 1. After Bonnie takes a shower, she gets dressed. So we can ask, what does Bonnie do after she takes a shower? So use the adverb clause in your question. And the main clause is the answer. So she gets dressed after she takes a shower, or after Bonnie takes a shower, she gets dressed. And then number 2, Bonnie takes a shower before she gets dressed. So use the adverb clause again. What does Bonnie do before she gets dressed? And the answer is the main clause, Bonnie takes a shower. Or you can include the adverb clause. So you can say Bonnie takes a shower before she gets dressed. Okay, so I'll give you some time to do numbers 3 through 10. Make questions. Okay, so number 3, what does Bonnie do before she makes coffee? Number 4, what does Bonnie do after she gets dressed? Okay, number 5, what does Bonnie do before she eats breakfast? And number 6, what does Bonnie do after she brings in the newspaper? Number 7, what does Bonnie do after she eats breakfast? Number 8, what does Bonnie do before she leaves for work? Number 9, what does Bonnie do after she makes coffee? And number 10, what does Bonnie do before she brings in the newspaper?